Hello, everybody. My name's Kim, and I'm a registered veterinary nurse, and I'm also a volunteer for the British Veterinary Nursing Association. I'm delighted to be joined this evening by this amazing panel. We've got Chris, Gaynor, and David. I'll give them the opportunity to introduce themselves and also explain what they do as an association. Tonight's topic is around welfare of pets in schools. So we're going to cover everything from how, if you are already keeping animals in schools, what you need to do. If you're considering getting an animal for a school, what's in place for you and how to go about it, what the stress implications might be. There's going to be lots of things covered, and I'm really excited to be joined by this panel because there's going to be quite a lot of discussion tonight, and I'm really excited for it. If you do have any questions, we are live on Facebook, so do put them in the comments and we'll get to them. If you're listening to this on Zoom, then pop them in the chat box as well, and I'll get to those questions throughout. This will be recorded as well, so if you have to pop off because you can't finish watching it, then it will be available to watch it back as a recording. So without further ado, I will go around the screen in order and let everybody explain who they are and what they do. So I think I've got Chris first on my screen. So thank you for joining us this evening.
Hi, yeah. So my name is Chris Bennett. I am head of community programs and partnerships at Woodgreen. So as a wider charity, our organisation is there for rehoming, for education and support, and also kind of working in local communities to catch problems early or prevent problems from happening that might result in animal suffering or a need for relinquishment.
Thank you, Chris. And then I've got Gaynor. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Hi, Kim. Yes, hi, I'm Gaynor Davies. I'm from the British Hen Welfare Trust. I'm head of operations and welfare. So I'm the person who looks after the distribution of hens around the country from farms who are depopulating. But I also have a veterinary background. I'm a veterinary nurse of 40 years experience. And we work very closely with vets and also with DEFRA to try and improve the lot of all hens, not just the ones we're taking out of cages.
Thank you, Gaynor. And then David, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Kim, and good evening, everyone. Yeah, my name is David Allen. I work for the RSPCA in their prevention and education team. And I guess our approach is a three-tier one. So we're all about engaging and inspiring everyone to love animals and to understand their needs. But then at tier two, it's about this early help and support for people who are struggling or having difficulties with their pets. And then our tier three work, which is probably the most well known within the RSPCA, as our intervention and resolve issues. And that's very often through the inspectorate, but can also be working with us in the education team as well. So that's the RSPCA. Just can I quickly say that Chris and I also are representing the Pet Education Partnership, PEP, this evening. And that's a website worth visiting because it provides a lot of ideas and ways to raise animal welfare issues in schools.
Thank you. I'll see if we've got people who are joining us this evening who might be able to pop that into the chat box. So that was the Pet Education Partnership, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. And we've got a digital event coming up ourselves very shortly, looking at mental health issues and movement, which is an interesting one, working with Mental Health Week.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, look, I'll check that out. Thank you. So we've already done a live discussion like this last year, actually, which was available on the BVNA Welfare of Pets in School Toolkit. Sorry, that was a bit of a mouthful. So again, if you might find that there's useful information on that as well. So if you want to check that out, then that will be available on the toolkit. Right, so we'll get to some questions because we did have a few questions that we had prior to the event. So I'll go through those first because we have those already prepared. And the first question is, what are the benefits of keeping pets in school? So I'll ask all of you if that's okay. So I'll start from Chris again and I'll work my way around. So what are the benefits of keeping pets in school?
I think it's for me, it's important to look at it from a two-tiered approach. That there's, we talk about benefits or sort of compromises to children, and also to pets as well, and to view them both as kind of individual situations and circumstances. So we have a lot of research about positive well-being and improving children's learning in that environment if there are pets there. Less research at the moment, and evidence about the welfare of pets being kept in classrooms as well. So our approach is very much looking from the animal welfare perspective, for which animal welfare needs can be difficult to meet in that environment, if possible at all, and something that we do feel that everybody should have an awareness of.
And then Gaynor, what's your approach to that question?
Okay, well, we feel that hens are sort of uniquely suited to living in schools because they're sociable, inquisitive, and quickly adapt into the normal and daily routine of school life. Adopting a small flock of hens is also a wonderful opportunity to develop a team working, a sense of personal responsibility, financial literacy, good awareness of hygiene and personal safety. It's a huge range of curriculum supporting skills. It can bring different age groups, staff, parents, and local community together and enrich school life in a positive and unexpected way. And anecdotally, and from what we hear back from schools who have had hens, we feel that it quite often it's a life enriching experience for them. It's good for mental health for kids, and they've got the responsibility of taking on looking after a life, and following it through. From the point of hens, we're perfectly in favour of it.
Okay, brilliant. And then David.
Okay, so the PEP, as I mentioned, the Pet Education Partnership brings together 8 charities, animal welfare charities that do work in education. And I think it might just be helpful to sort of talk through their policy and their statement on this issue. But then also I'd like to go on and look at, we're getting more and more questions from schools about emotional support animals. And it might be worth us opening that up as a discussion as well, because that is a reason why we're seeing more animals in schools than we have in previous times, certainly since last year when we were speaking about this topic. So the PEP actually see that resident or visiting pets used for the education of children may lead, and very often does lead, to compromised welfare. And this is due to, first of all, inadequate environments in schools, painful, stressful, and repeated handling that often happens with young people, that the animal husbandry involved fails to meet the required minimum legal standard, which is in line with the Animal Welfare Act of 2006. Schools need to be aware of the legislation that protects animals, and it's one that's often not well known. So yeah, the 8 leading animal welfare charities have come together to come up with this statement. One of the key things that if you're thinking about getting an animal for school is, first of all, to develop your rationale of why you're doing this, and then to develop a policy that clearly states the areas that need to be covered to ensure the welfare and safety of the children, but also the welfare and safety of the animals. As I mentioned, we've seen an uptick for sure in the number of animals that are being admitted into schools, allowed into schools, because they're emotional support animals. And there does seem to be some confusion between assistance dogs, those that are trained through guide dogs for the blind or through hearing dogs for the deaf, that type of situation, where there is clear legislation and training for them that supports them in their role. And the 2010 Equality Act makes it important that these animals have access to institutions, buildings, businesses, offices, hospitals, wherever. Then there's therapy dogs, where there's far less regulation, far less structure around these. There is the Pets as Therapy, PAT, you may have heard of, but this really only looks at the behavior and not necessarily the behavior in a school or in an environment like a hospital or an old people's home. So therapy dogs, therapy animals are slightly different. And then the big area, the emotional support animals, this is the third category. Here, there is no legislation, no structure around it at all. People just say themselves, I need this dog, I need this animal with me all the time because it helps my mental health or supports my emotional health. And here again, schools often get bounced into having animals in the classroom, not realizing that they actually, this level, this emotional support animal, there is nothing that says they have to follow it. They have to still have this policy that balances that need of the school, of the education, and also the needs of the pupils, not just the ones that are saying they need this emotional support. So that's how I'd like to pitch the RSPCA's position and PEPs at this time.
No, absolutely. I think that's definitely a different way of looking at it, isn't it? I think last year when we covered this topic, we didn't mention that, I don't believe, did we? We sort of discussed it from a, if you are going to keep animals in school, this is what you need to do. And we had all the sort of the alternative solutions to it, but now we know a bit more, don't we, about it, and actually what the stress implications might be, not just on the animals, but what the stress implications might be on everyone involved in caring for that animal. So yeah, very, very interesting topic, I think. So I think this next question, I think, then I don't know if you're going to you're probably not going to say if there is a suitable animal then for the classroom, I think, from what you're alluding to. But one of the questions was, what animal is best? So if you are going to choose to keep an animal in the classroom, is there a particular animal that would be more suitable? So we'll start with Chris again.
Yeah, and I think the answer is going to be, we can definitely talk about what would be the worst. And some of the most common that we see, rabbits, for example, which, even in the greatest of pet homes, it's very difficult to meet even the minimum standards of care for a rabbit. And we'd always be advocating to be exceeding that. So rabbits can be very frightened by noise, by movement. They're a prey animal, and a classroom environment is very frightening for them. And I'm just bringing that up because that's one of the common ones that we do come across. But this might be a good opportunity to jump on and talk about alternatives to actually keeping pets in classrooms, when we're saying which pet might be the best, and saying, well, actually, here are some of the things that schools and teachers could provide. And I'm a very big sort of believer in things like nature connectedness, that actually just being outside can bring the same kind of positive well-being to children that is alluded to in a research that pets can bring to children too. And dipping into charities and resources like the Wildlife Trust, things like that, to help sort of create bird tables, bird boxes, do some work outside in nature detectives and that kind of thing. But you can replicate that same sort of well-being and connectedness to animals and to the natural environment without actually having a pet put in the classroom.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting, a better way of looking at it, actually. Rather than saying what's the best, think of it more what might be considered not suitable, and then what the alternatives are, instead of going out and buying a pair of rabbits or a pair of guinea pigs or the fish tank for the waiting room, etc., etc. So, and Gaynor's obviously said that hens, as an association, they provide all the information about hens. They're not necessarily kept in a classroom, though. Hopefully, they're kept outside. So, do you want to sort of explain what your position is on that, please?
Yes, absolutely. What I'd say is that we have a sort of 5-point system where people who want to adopt hens into a school have to have a really good think about what they're getting into, and we have a lot of support from the charity. The 5 questions we say are: can you commit to caring for them for the duration of their lives? I mean, ex-commercial hens, they leave the farm at 18 months of age. They could go on to 5-6 years. They need to have a good quality of life. They need to have suitable accommodation. They need to have suitable care. We say, do you understand their behavioural needs? They can't just be stuck in a coop. They need to be able to live their lives as they would in the wild. Are you comfortable with the possibility that they might not lay eggs? Because a lot of people think, getting eggs, hens in schools, getting eggs, maybe not. are you prepared to deal with the death of the hens? Because hens don't live forever. You know, they might live for a short time. How are you going to talk to your kids about that? Do you have a sort of a plan to help pupils understand where the hens have come from? Because these birds are going to arrive looking probably quite poorly feathered and a bit tatty, and you know what's the narrative behind it. And all of this, we have a huge amount of resource behind this, so that people have got support. But we would always encourage schools not to jump into having hens until they've really thought about all of these points, and our adoption process is that you have to speak to our adoption people and be sure that you know exactly what you're getting into.
Thank you. I'm sure someone will pop your information on in the chat box. British Hen Welfare Trust, they do amazing work, and as a charity they provide a lot of information about how to support you, how to keep hens. So I please do check it out. Okay, so David, what's your response?
Well, if I may, I'm going to go back to Gaynor and say, can you talk a little bit about the benefits of your approach as opposed to hatching projects? Because hatching projects, which are popular in schools still, I'm afraid to say, cause the RSPCA no end of problem, particularly with the number of cockerels that end up at our centres, which we struggle with. Could you talk a little bit about that and then your advice regarding schools and hatching projects?
Yeah, absolutely horrific. We are completely against hatching projects. A class teacher might struggle to give the eggs and the chicks the amount of attention they need. They need to be turned. If a fertilized egg is turned by a mother hen about 30 times a day, a teacher in the classroom is not going to be able to do that. They might get stuck in the eggshell. They can be injury or death. I mean, then you've got weekends where these chicks might be left for a whole weekend with nobody attending them. We are completely, anti-hatching in schools. We have a whole bunch of resources on our website, which is curriculum-based teaching for people to actually teach the classes without having to have chicks in the school. And from our point of view, there's absolutely no reason to have chicks in school. Every day we get dozens of calls from people saying, I've got chicks, I've got male hens, male cockerels that have been through a hatching project, and I can't find a home for them. And we're just constantly trying to find homes for these poor males. It's not their fault. The companies that say, well, we'll take them back, well, then what happens to them then? You've got to think about that. What sort of lesson does that give the children, that there are some sort of expendable item that you can just pass back when you've finished learning from it? So, from our charity point of view, absolutely not. We're not in favour of chick hatching. We've got lots and lots of resources on our website where schools can download and actually learn about all of the key stages that they need to without actually physically having hens in schools.
No, perfect. Yeah, I mean, that you do see it. I mean, I've seen some pictures on social media recently of ducklings and I just think, yeah, I'm so glad as associations that you just think it's not acceptable. It's because I do think that there's not enough information out there for schools. They don't know what to do with them afterwards, and it's just such a sad situation. And then, as you've just said, like the cockerels, what happens to them, and it does make me really sad, to think that they've been brought into this world not intent, they didn't ask for this, and then sadly we end up in that situation, don't we, where we've got to try and find homes for them or other solutions, sadly.
I think Gaynor made a great point there about what sort of lesson does it set for children, because schools are this environment where it's setting best practice and standards for the rest of the children's lives, and that sort of modelling of what inappropriate animal accommodation or disposable pets or something else. If children see this and learn this in a school and think, okay, well, pets can be disposable, and if this one doesn't work, or this is how it's lived and this is how it's cared for, it can be very damaging for future pet populations, which all of us as organisations are trying to prevent.
Yeah, I think I was there was something at the conference I went to at the weekend. I was at a behaviour conference where we were discussing the emotional the emotions that we have around animals as well. So it kind of covered quite a lot of different things. But one of the speakers said that we start to normalize bad. So we think that an animal, when we've purchased them, and then a week later they might die, or a year later they might die, but we get into a habit of just thinking that that's normal, when actually it's not, is it? You know, because these animals, if we look after them and care for them and purchase them from places where, you know, legitimate places, like we've done our research and we know what we want and where they've come from, it shouldn't be normal. So we shouldn't be seeing that as a normal thing. It's because that's not the situation, is it? It's I thought that was quite an interesting way of looking at it, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's often called the hidden curriculum in schools, isn't it? What are you actually saying? It's not actually written anywhere. It's just the messages that you pick up, you know, subliminally, and that's really quite an issue. I'd like to pick up on both the points of the other speakers. I mean, it is all about the why. That's what I would say, is what is your rationale? What are you trying to achieve with these animals if you're thinking about having them in schools? We mentioned rabbits, you know, hamsters, another obvious species not to have in schools. They're nocturnal, so that when they're actually most active, no one's around. So that's a big issue for me as well. So what are you trying to achieve? So Chris then mentions, well, look at the other opportunities that exist in nature to teach and to learn about animals. That green prescription, that's a big thing now, I think is really important. And then I really like Gaynor's approach of, these are the things that you need to talk through before you can even think about getting hens for your school. Have you got the right environment? Have you got the behavioural knowledge? And so I'd like to come back to the policy, and these are some of the policy points that the RSPCA would like to see. And certainly the first one is about a named and competent person. You have to have somebody who really does understand the needs, the behaviour of the animals that you're thinking about getting. And these have got to be responsible for the welfare of the animal 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So it's a huge responsibility. Do you have somebody within your school community, doesn't have to be a teacher, but do you, who would take that on? And I think that's a big issue to consider. Then it's about providing that suitable environment. You know, the British Hen Welfare Trust will be able to advise you on what it might be, but in most cases, it's going to be really hard to provide the environment that that animal needs. Again, and that environment, and Gaynor made a good point, the needs of their environment will change over time as the animal ages. It's going to need other elements within the environment to ensure that it has its best life. Yeah, that appropriate species and having a health and welfare plan. Everyone knows that vets these days are expensive, you know, and you are going to want to ensure that that animal has the best life. So have you got the cover that's needed from a vet? Do you have that welfare plan of when the checks are going to take place? That's an important one. The provision of shelter, appropriate shelter, veterinary care at all times, including the term time, but also weekends and holidays. That all handling is a supervised activity. You know, even if you've got responsible pupils who are, you know, acting as the peer support in those situations, are they strong enough to stop another child who's got intent that is not to harm that is possible to harm that animal? Is that there? Rest periods, you know, for all species. Again, how are you going to manage the breaks that animals need? We often, you know, we have breaks built into the school day. How is the animal going to get their break? How are they going to get that time away? Yeah, indiscriminate breeding, that's a big issue as well in many schools. Yeah, and how about at the end of every day, there's a retrospective assessment of what happened during the day with that animal. Did it achieve the aims that you were looking for? And that needs to be looked at all the time if you are seriously thinking about taking an animal into schools. Yeah, that reflection, I think, is an important part. All teachers hopefully are encouraging reflective learners, and they need to be reflective learners themselves.
Yeah, that's really wow. I mean, I think that's really good. And I think you've actually just probably answered quite a lot of the questions I was going to ask, but you know, so but it's important, isn't it? I think for me, I think the reason why I was so passionate about this topic when I joined BVNA as a council member, and something that I was very lucky to be able to spearhead, and then as a team we managed to get this toolkit together where we actually learned there was a lot of associations out there that were in this, that felt the same way I did, you know, and it was, and you could tell that there was frustration over it, about how we can educate schools on improving their housing, I think, as well, was one of the things. So yeah, that's it's really good that actually over the years we're starting to see more kind of awareness a little bit, but it does make me sad though still that, you know, we are now maybe considering keeping pets in school because of the emotional side of things. So I guess that leads on to the next question of the stress implications then, because I know we are aware that animals get stressed, they have feelings as well, but do the teachers know how to pick up on that stress? Do the parents know? Do the children understand? And also, I guess, what are the stress implications on us as well, on the teachers, the parents, and the children? Because as you alluded to, who takes care of the animals when, you know, there's school holidays, there's bank holidays, there's weekends, teachers go on holiday, and then who looks after them? So there's quite a big picture to look at there, isn't there, when it comes to stress? I don't know who wants to take that question first. I'll open that up to anyone. Oh, Gaynor, put your hand up first.
Yeah, from our point of view, we always we have a sort of a plan for schools and say, look, okay, there's various options if you have chickens in schools. I mean, generally schools are quite secure places because they're secure environments anyway. So from a sort of predation point of view, the hens are generally safe. But then this question of, do you have, option one where each class takes a turn to care for the hens during a week, and they are the regular, providers and lookers afters, or do you have a 1 year group takes responsibility and they follow the hens through that whole year group, or do you have a chicken club that you set up where anybody who wants from any of the year groups can join in? Or do you have like a drop-in chicken care system where parents and all sorts can join in? But the most important things are what happens at weekends, what about holidays, how do you make pupils involved, and how do you get a buy-in from the staff and the parents from the start? So there's no point in starting any of these projects without having a complete overview for the school, that they know they are completely on side with it and they know what they're taking on, and they know that they can give these hens an environment where they are able to establish a normal behavior, and the kids can learn from them. They can learn numeracy, they can learn literacy from various teaching packages that we have. They can learn about, building a coop, how to look after hens, husbandry, all sorts of things. There's an amazing amount of knowledge that can come from these hens, but you've got to have that basic grounding and to start with. And we would never suggest putting hens into a school if the school weren't completely prepared. And that's the baseline, really.
So do you think then, so do hens not generally get stressed then? Are hens kind of fine in a school setting? Do they not tend to mind loud noises and children kind of running around feeding them? Are they generally quite chilled out?
Hens very quickly adapt to the environment they're in. Obviously, if it's new to start with, so for the first probably week, they're going to be a bit stressed about it because it's going to be somewhere completely different. But they are extremely adaptable creatures, and as long as they are provided with food, a safe environment, ability to express their normal behaviour. And they just love to be stroked and cuddled. In actual fact, they are extremely amenable as pets. But from a school point of view, they're probably one of the few pets that are happy in a school environment.
Okay. That's interesting. I wasn't aware. I knew that we'd spoken about that actually in a podcast, haven't we, Gaynor? So if you wanted to listen to the podcast myself and Gaynor did, then again, that's available on the toolkit. So yeah, I thought I'd ask that question because I had heard that before about hens, and I just thought I better, ask that question, whether they do get stressed or not. In terms of other animals, though, like your guinea pigs, your hamsters, your rabbits, the snakes, that kind of thing. I guess this question can go to Chris and David, I suppose. Like they would be more. Well, I don't consider them to be suitable pets, but yeah, and I think they do get stressed, don't they? So, how does that impact everybody involved, though? Like if you've got a plan in place to look after them, does all the swapping and changing though of which parents look after the animals whilst they're away, does that then have a stress implication on the animal as well? And then does that then not cause stress for that parent who's got the animal for the week because they don't really know what they're doing with the rabbit? They just know they need to feed and clean them, but they might not necessarily know what they're doing in terms of looking out for health problems. So there's a bigger thing there, isn't there, with the other animals? Yeah.
Pick up on the people side is, pets are stressful for any pet owner. The amount of worry they cause you because of the bond that you have with them, and maybe there's a slight dissociation with a school pet to what you would have with your own pet. Because we all worry every time our dog doesn't eat their breakfast or our cat has a bit of diarrhea, and that causes an immense amount of stress. And I'm sure that every pet that enters a school environment is done with positive intentions. Everybody working in that school environment is caring and compassionate. And I suppose the ask would be to really kind of research how to meet the welfare needs of that pet. And then, like Dave said, a great idea is every day is assess, have we been able to meet that welfare needs, and what are the impact on the pet? And I bet a lot of times that might be, wow, we're not. There is a health condition which might require a vet trip, and who would pay the bill? Who would take them to the vet? Or the animal had a negative experience, and I bet if you really understand them welfare needs and think about it as if it was your own pet, but anybody involved in caring for it would probably find it quite a stressful experience.
From my perspective, humans are very, very bad at recognizing behavioral traits of animals, and it does take a lot of work and a lot of careful research to find out what you're being told. Animals are sentient and they're also individual. So each of them have different responses to different stimuli, and it's very hard to know. And, you often hear, with dogs that are being used as therapy dogs, oh, my dog would never bite. That's really tough to say because you never know the scenario, that unique scenario on a Friday afternoon after a really, really busy week when they haven't had enough rest periods. They may be falling ill themselves, and it's very hard to recognize because animals are good at hiding when they've got a problem, especially those that are prey species. And so humans will miss that, and then you've got a problem. And particularly with dogs, misreading their behavior, not understanding that a wagging tail doesn't mean the dog is happy. It might mean a whole series of different issues. It means it's been stimulated in some way, but not necessarily that it's feeling comfortable or happy. Dogs yawning, oh, the dog's tired, it needs a rest. Actually, it's again responding to a very stressful situation, and that's an early warning that the animal is not happy in the current setting. So schools, one of my colleagues does a fantastic activity which we must get this up on our website, that a dog does most of its sensing of the environment around it through its nose. It can smell hundreds and hundreds of more smells. So what's it like when a dog goes into a school? And it's a great activity to do with students, saying, if you could only smell, that was your main one, what would a school be like? How would you describe the school through smells? And then you begin to understand the sensory overload that a dog must be experiencing when it's taking into a school environment. Now, that's a dog. We don't know about necessarily the ability of other animals to smell. They might use different senses to understand what's around their environment, what's a threat. So it's certainly an interesting activity to get humans to understand a little bit more about what it's like to be an animal.
Yeah, definitely. I think when we actually ask ourselves if what we're doing is the right thing for the animal and for us, it starts to open up a whole different can of worms, doesn't it, I guess. But I think we do need to ask those questions, like you said. I think before we buy pets ourselves, we hopefully do our research, we look into what animal we want, where to purchase them from, whether we want a rescue. We always think about it first, and I think that's, in a school setting, we need to do the same thing. We need to consider the wider problem, and what alternatives you can have, because like you said, you've mentioned wildlife, so there's the hedgehogs, going outside, enjoying the fresh air, taking it all in really, and sort of learning about it that way. So yeah, it's thank you. I guess that leads on to another question that we got asked was, are there any training courses available for teachers or parents about keeping animals? I don't think there is, but I know that you've all got lovely resources available, haven't you, on your websites? But do we know of any training courses? Don't think we know.
No, we just have downloadable resources which schools can access, but we don't have any training courses as such.
I think direct into the Pet Education Partnership website or any of the sort of member organisations and charities, there'll be, again, downloadable care guides, videos, that kind of thing that might teach you best practice for caring for a pet. There is the Animal Welfare Act, and there are codes of practice to support that, which might give you best practice again for how to care for cats, dogs, rabbits. Basic in understanding dog behavior courses, if at any point you are going to have a dog visit your school, somebody responsible for, like Dave was mentioning, some like nuances in body language around tail wagging and yawning and looking in the opposite direction, how they're all sort of stress signals and that kind of thing. So definitely, somebody that can recognize some of that body language be very useful.
Yeah, it's about doing research. We wouldn't have training programs because it's something we're not trying to encourage. And I would just throw into the pot, when you were talking, Kim, it made me think of the cost of having an animal is a key one that causes most of the reasons why there's relinquishments. People don't think through how much it's going to cost to feed them, what the veterinary support is going to be required, have they got the right insurances? Schools need to check the insurance situation as well. With some animals going in, like an assistance animal, the organisation will have an insurance attached to that, so that if there were any issues, it's covered. But you're on your own in many cases, and insurers will probably put the premium up for the school if you've got an animal in the setting, and you need to check that before you get the animal. So do your research. Is exactly the same as you were saying for a pet owner, if schools are thinking about this as an issue as well.
Yeah. I think as well, the other thing is a lot of first opinion vets can do kind of like the basic care of guinea pigs and rabbits and hens, but they may need to refer them to a specialist exotic vet. So you've also got to consider whether you are prepared to travel to the nearest exotic vet, because they are very few and far between. And because a lot of the animals that we choose to keep in the classroom are under the exotic category, it might be that you will have to consider going to see an exotic vet. And then you've got the cost implications of that as well, because you are seeing a specialist, so you might need to spend a little bit more money. So yeah. So we've got some questions coming through, looking at this from Facebook, which is so let's have a look. Sorry, just bear with me 1 second. Just scrolling up. So one of the comments on Facebook, so I personally don't agree on pets at school. Guinea pigs and rabbits are prey animals and will get stressed in a loud setting, which school tends to be. So the question is, do they know the cage requirements for these animals, and do they have the adequate space? And I think we said that earlier, didn't we, that sometimes schools can't provide the adequate space. Most of the time they don't, so they are all squashed up, kept in corridors possibly. There's no runs available. Moving them in sort of surroundings and sounds, or if they have dogs or cats at home, it's a new smell, they'll have to get used to it. Also, it's never just one guinea pig or one rabbit. They are social animals and need to stay in pairs, groups, which parents and teachers at home won't properly have the room for. That's a very long question, but I think we have covered most of that already, haven't we?
As an alternative, we haven't mentioned yet is the soft toys. You know, we do some amazing work with soft toys. Very realistic ones are available now. We do veterinary corners, you know, where you learn about how to carry out a welfare check. And in fact, we've got a great story from our Birmingham centre where we taught a young girl to do a welfare check on one of our soft toy dogs there, and went home and they discovered their dog had an ear infection. You know, and so that they were able to transfer the skill that they had to that situation. Now, you've got to be careful there as well. Obviously, she was with her parents when she did this, but they noticed something that they hadn't caught on before because there'd been some training using a soft toy. So don't underestimate, you know, having a toy area as a way to teach animal welfare, good animal welfare.
It's a great opportunity for a plug again as well, Dave, to direct people towards a pets education partnership, because another great alternative is a lot of the charities will come out and deliver educational sessions which are really interactive, tie in with a curriculum, and can teach some really great knowledge and behaviours. You know, we've touched on things like sentience and dog safety and things like that. Great alternative to having them in there.
Yeah, I was just going to mention school talks actually, because you know, vets and vet nurses go out to schools as well and provide educational talks as well. So I think you know, don't hesitate to contact the associations, your local vet practice, because actually you might find that we'll come out and do a nice presentation for you, talk to you about all the, you know, animal behavior, animal health. It'll all be covered in a school talk, and it's free as well. You don't have to pay anything. I think this is just more a comment, really. Someone on Facebook has also said the primary school where my stepdaughters went had pets, but I can't remember the children having any interaction with them. So I never really understood the reason for them to get the pets in the first place. That's quite sad, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. We don't want that happening. Right. So we got some other... We did have some other interesting questions, actually. So the one of the questions was, what needs to be done to ensure a classroom hygiene is maintained appropriately in terms of spreading infection? So I'll go to David first, maybe, for that one.
Well, it's very, very difficult to do it well. It's more than just hand washing. That's what I would say, is that you really would need to talk to your local vet and find out exactly how they ensure that animal, you know, diseases are not spread. Zoonotic diseases are an issue, particularly when you've got a lot of people around an animal. So you would need to find out from your local vet, or Kim, you could talk to one of your members to find out what needs to be done. But I would argue that a school is an environment, we know how quickly colds move around, you know, so zoonotic diseases is going to be, and allergies. We haven't talked about allergies that children have. Very often they're not as easy to, you know, I'm allergic to all cats. No, it's some cats or in some situations. So yeah, there's a key area to think about there.
I'd always be astonished how many pets in schools sort of get a reasonable risk assessment against it, because of the variations in child ages and simple things such as child allergies and zoonotic diseases that teachers are probably not aware of, but that might come from the pets in there. You know, just going through that risk assessment process. Well, you know, I mean, it's the first place to start to put the right precautions in as well, but probably some good learning in there.
Yeah, it is a difficult one, infection control, and I think you're right. I think it's more than just washing your hands. Definitely, that's just the basics of it. That's just the start of maintaining hygiene. You know, you've got to be aware that if you've not washed your hands, but you've touched the door before you've washed your hands, then you could potentially leave some disease on there, and then a child could come along, put their hand where you've just put your hand, but you've washed your hands, and you've thought you've washed your hands, but you've touched something first. So the spread can happen quite quickly. So yeah, you do have to be very, very careful and very, very mindful. You know, do you have the correct PPE as well for some animals? So are you wearing gloves if you are picking up reptiles, amphibians, that kind of thing? So yeah, it's a bit of a, we haven't got really time to sadly talk about all that tonight, but yeah, that is something that you do have to consider if you are having pets in school, is an infection control policy as well, just to add to the list.
Also with birds, obviously, if you have hens in a school, we have to think about avian influenza.
Yes.
And you know, making sure that we have adequate measures in place for if we have a lockdown, a national lockdown for avian influenza, that the parents and children and teachers know how to properly access the birds without compromising anything.
Yeah, and that surprisingly, the lockdown for chickens and other bird species was happening around the same sort of time we were going through COVID, wasn't it? So I guess at least because we were going through it anyway, we were kind of probably used to it and could deal with it. But it, with bird flu again, because it can spread so quickly, you do need to be following the government recommendations, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And then there was one of the other questions is, how can the potential benefit of student well-being be thoughtfully considered against the potential animal stress? And I think we have kind of covered that, haven't we, already? But I thought that was still quite a good question to ask.
Yeah, well, in mental health circles, too often, they say, oh, get a pet, that will help your mental health, where in fact, it will probably add to the stress, as we've already mentioned. So I think there needs to be a change in the thinking there for sure, because I think, yeah, it's not a good situation. People are choosing designer animals now because they don't want to do the walks that a dog might need, or they don't they just yeah, they're thinking about a designer pet designed for their lifestyle rather than the animal improving their lifestyle, because it's far more natural and far more healthy in its outlook on life.
Yeah,
a great place to start, and it's something we're looking at would be to even involve the children in that decision as well. Who is going to benefit from this, and how, and why. As a dad of two primary school children, we have a dog, and both my girls have got friends who are scared of dogs, and some are allergic to cats, and some are scared of cats, and some would be scared of this species. And really involving the children in that sort of decision making as to who's going to benefit, who would find it stressful, how would you benefit. It might be a really good place to start for teachers.
Yeah. We are definitely being more aware that actually pets can be stressful, and that's it's okay to admit that as well. We don't need to think that having pets to provide us with that emotional support and help us with our mental well-being, we can say that actually that's not right for me, I need something else to help me with that. So I guess that's another thing that you might have to think of in schools. It might be that some children love animals and they'll do everything they can, where there might be somebody else in that classroom who actually finds it quite stressful and quite scary. Yeah. Yes, Gaynor.
I think one of the things that I would like to just point out is that because one of the key stages in education is is birth and education and hatching, that schools are encouraged to do chick hatching, when really there are lots of other ways of learning about reproduction, and it's not particularly helpful that that's part of the sort of pushed curriculum, if you like.
Yeah, it's interesting that actually, because there isn't really any regulations. The schools are basically sold, they basically can make their own decision whether they keep animals or not, aren't they? They're not. It's not a sort of a yes, you can keep them, or no, you can't keep them. It's just your choice, and as long as you follow the 5 freedoms, then it's okay. Yeah, I find that quite interesting. Yeah.
We did have a local school last year that bred hamsters as part of their sort of a reproduction topic, and the hamsters were then offered to parents of the children in the school, and not seen that before, but it doesn't surprise me with where some of the things we're seeing going right now.
Yeah. Oh.
Comes back to the why, doesn't it? What are you trying to achieve? And there are so many other ways of doing it. You know, we live in a world now where there's video streaming, where you can get such good, you know, correct education through that sort of route, and it's easy to find online. You know, it's also easy to find very negative images online as well, so you have to be careful and double check that what you are streaming or you are seeing is in fact best welfare. But yeah, you don't need the animal in the school for sure.
Yeah, it's the whole who's it benefiting? Is it benefiting us? Is it benefiting the animals? Who suffers afterward? You know, who is it who's suffering? All of us potentially, because I guess you've got the emotional side of it if one of the animals does pass away, and perhaps one of the children was quite attached to that animal, and then you've got to deal with that as well. So there's so much stuff, isn't there, to think about. Yeah, it does make me quite sad. If, say, for example, a parent or somebody had a welfare concern and they're aware of an animal being kept somewhere and they weren't necessarily happy about it, who can they contact for advice? Who would they need to call? I would have thought RSPCA first, David, but is there anything else? Is there
Well,
anywhere
I would argue speak to the local vet and try and encourage the vet who knows the actual needs of the animal. Ask if the school has a vet that they use, so that the vet is called in to support this. In extreme circumstances, yes, the RSPCA has investigated. We obviously, because we don't approve of animals in schools, we don't go out to look at situations in educational settings. We would just provide the advice that's required and point people to the legislation that they need to meet.
Okay.
We have a hen helpline Monday to Friday 9 till 5. We don't do weekends, unfortunately, at the moment. But if anybody has any concern, they can always contact us.
Brilliant. Yeah, I would say contact the vets if you're concerned about health, and then if you think it's cruelty, I suppose that's when you would get the RSPCA involved if there was a cruelty aspect. But if it's in terms of like welfare, you know, if it's something that the local vet practice can help with, then yeah, definitely contact them. I think, unfortunately, we've only got 5 minutes left, and I know that we wanted to talk about quite a few more things. So I didn't know if you wanted to just have an opportunity now to just finish off anything that you wanted to bring up this evening that we haven't already brought up. I'll start with David first.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I suppose it's where we're almost touching on, you know, the difference between cruelty and suffering and animals not living their best life. So, you know, to say that animals in schools is cruel, that might be, but the animal will probably be suffering in some way, and it's very hard to monitor or understand that. And is it living its best life? And I guess that's what we're trying to do. All of us should be trying to, every animal has the opportunity to live its best life. And that's what we're trying to achieve through the RSPCA.
And you've got some amazing resources available on the RSPCA website, haven't you? Like a school syllabus and things like that as well, haven't you?
If you can, yes, navigate your way through, put in RSPCA, put education into the search line that we have, and that will bring you to a very new website that we've just, you know, literally just launched. So please do go and have a look at some of the ideas there and the alternatives. We haven't spoken a great deal. We've suggested some, but yeah, it's the alternatives, because animal welfare, we want people to learn about animal welfare, and that's important, so that again they can make that best life.
So RSPCA education, and it'll come up hopefully.
Yeah,
oh, I think it's been put in the chat
Google
box.
should get that. Yeah,
Someone's put it in the chat box already, which is amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll go to Gaynor next. Is any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say I'd just mimicking what David said. When we have amazing educational packages on our website, have a look. You know, there's all sorts in there. There's amazing tips about if you're thinking about having hens in schools, what to think about before you take that step. We've got all sorts of education plans there. But what I would say is that the hens that we rehome are coming from generally a caged environment where they're in a poor situation, and they're hopefully being rehomed into a better, more loving, more enriching environment, and the children can learn from that whole process, as well as just having the hens there, the whys and wherefores behind commercial egg production, and it is an enriching and nourishing experience.
Yeah, so they're actually probably getting a better quality of life, really, aren't they? Hopefully. Yeah. Chris?
I mean, yeah, I think it's all been said. I mean, I would summarize it by, talking about the prevention, the early planning. I think that Dave put a really good point forward about what are you trying to achieve by having a pet in your school, and exactly what do I need to know. And there are some great resources out there that would teach you exactly how to. You have a problem with the Animal Welfare Act, I suppose, is it's a minimum standard. And, there's that great line of the best life, we want to push beyond a minimum standard. We don't think minimum standards are anything to aim for or to act as achievable, especially in an environment where you're modeling to the next generation of pet owners. You should be exceeding, not hitting a minimum standard. So really think about what you're trying to do, and really, can you achieve it? And absolutely, what are the alternatives? How can we get outside, create a nature area, do something that's going to benefit the environment and wildlife, as well as the children's well-being, and not compromise an animal.
Yeah, I love that. Exceed it rather than just meet the minimum. I love that. I really do. Yeah, that's such a good way of looking at it. If you can exceed the minimum requirements, then go for it. Yeah. But yeah, was with the just one final thing about the pet education partnership, was there some online events coming up soon, or is there anything that might be of interest to us that we could tune into and have a listen?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you'd enjoy that. We've it's linked to Mental Health Week, and so and the theme is about movement and how movement can make us feel better. So we've taken a lesson activity looking at animals' movement and why it's important to them, and of course that picks up on the environment and where they are, and how you can learn further about that. Have you got the dates, Chris? I'm struggling here. I haven't got them in front of me now. Let me just.
Is it the week, the 12th of May? 11th of May, 12th of May. It's around that week. I think
it's on the Monday and the Wednesday. I think that we're running those. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I'll definitely check them out. And I think it sounds like we want other people to as well. So yeah, I'll be sure to.
Please do.
I will, definitely. Oh, brilliant. I mean, as always with these live discussions, we could talk for a lot longer than what we can in an hour. And we can definitely cover a wide range of topics and go into a lot of different things. But I think we would need a whole day. But I do want to just say thank you again for Chris and Gaynor and David for joining us. I just love how passionate everybody is about it, and I find it brilliant that we're all aiming for the same thing as well, that we're all on board, and that we just want what's best for not just the animals but for the school setting itself as well. And we're not saying don't keep, well, we're kind of trying to say don't keep them, but we would rather you think of an alternative an alternative solution if you can, or as Gaynor has said, hens seem to be a great solution. So if you can keep hens, then have a look at the British Hen Welfare Trust. There'll be absolutely loads of information on there for you. So thank you again so much for joining us. It's been absolutely brilliant. And as I said, all of this is recorded, so it will be available for you to listen to again. Thank you very much for your time, guys.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.